Welcome, everyone, to a Saturday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. And of course, we appreciate everyone welcoming us into their homes. TV Delmarva 14.1. Get social with us at BYP, hashtag BYP, at Rich Q on Q, IG, and Twitter, the like, and of course, the YouTube channel at Rich Q on Q. So hope everyone had a good sports week. You're enjoying your weekend in the first state and around. And of course, as always, keeping us locked in wherever you may travel via the YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q. So a lot of stuff to dive into on this Saturday. And I really wanted to focus on a couple things. We've got, I guess you can say, what I believe will be an extremely bizarre, bumpy, wild, and really, maybe when it's all said and done, unpredictable NFL offseason. And we also want to touch a little bit today, second portion of BYP, on this, this theory, this load management theory in the NBA. But I want to start with the NFL, pretty much 2 weeks removed from the Super Bowl. So we start to look into March offseason, March 15th. Again, that is a big time in the NFL when we start to talk about free agent signing period, free agents, when we start to talk about tagging players, the exclusive franchise tag, the one franchise tag per offseason for teams. So I wanted to kind of piggyback from last week's discussion, and we'll read off some tweets as well at Rich Q on Q, hashtag BYP. You had some, I guess we can say, different takes when it comes to some of the quarterbacking play over the past year or so in the NFL. But one thing remains the same. It is a quarterback-driven league, and typically what happens is we overpay for quarterbacks in the NFL. And the market, we like to think they reset the market when it comes to some of these quarterbacks. So what you find a lot of times is that we overpay for quarterbacks because we're paying them on not only what they did, but we think what they will do going forward. So that kind of leads me into a couple players I want to throw out there. Aaron Rodgers, who finally has come out of his hole, his retreat in Oregon. Derek Carr, Jimmy G, Daniel Jones, Lamar Jackson. We're in the first state right now, coming at you on TV 14.1, TV 14 Delmarva. So we know we got a lot of Commanders fans, a lot of Ravens fans. So we'll hit on Jackson in a moment. But I think if you are, let's say, the New York Jets, and the New York Jets are starved for a quarterback. They've got Zach Wilson, the young kid who right now looks like a bust, and they have a veteran, a journeyman quarterback, even though he's young, but he's well-traveled, Mike White, who was cut, I don't know what, 4 or 5 times by the Jets. And then, of course, you have the veteran in Joe Flacco, who's not going to be with the team. So they need a quarterback. Everyone's talking about making a push, making a move, trading for, a Lamar Jackson, or making a move for a Derek Carr or an Aaron Rodgers. Now, I think if you're the Jets right now, what you would consider is age, talent, and lack of drama. And I would sit there and go even further to say you want a leader, a player in Derek Carr, because Derek Carr kind of went about his business. I think he was over-criticized throughout the course of his career and time with the Raiders, and that defense did not bail him out. They were one of the worst defenses probably over the past 5, 6, 7 years of his career. I mean, they never had a really good defense. Derek Carr can play a little bit, and I think he's at that age where he understands, okay, do I want financial security and freedom, flexibility, or do I want to go in a spot where if I win a Super Bowl with the New York Jets, I'm basically roller skating in to the Hall of Fame. I mean, you take that dormant franchise that's won 169 with Joe Willie when they were a substantial underdog against the Colts in Super Bowl III and beat them 16-7. Now you win a second championship, a second Super Bowl with a franchise that is beyond starved to even get back to the Super Bowl. I mean, think about that, 69, one and done. So you have to put that in consideration. I think he comes with less baggage than an Aaron Rodgers, than a Lamar Jackson. I think they tried to paint the picture of him being a bad guy with the Raiders, and we're kind of going to push him out, push him through the back door. And now because he decided to separate himself from the team, well, he's not really a leader. I mean, I get that. I think it was a tough spot. I mean, I didn't like that. I think you got it out. But then when you kind of peel the curtain back a little bit, you kind of see that the Raiders were kind of pushing them through the back, and it wasn't a good fit. So there's Carr, there's Rodgers. If we believe the Jets are a ready-made championship level team, you would say, hey, go out and get Aaron Rodgers and give up a couple of draft picks. I don't think you want to mortgage the future, though, for Aaron Rodgers. Because to me, this has the exact makings of 2008 with Brett Favre. Brett Favre, they were trying to deal him. He wanted to go to Minnesota. They didn't make it happen. He went with the Jets for 1 year, got hurt late. They were 8-3, lost a couple games after that, missed the playoffs, and then Favre eventually went from Minnesota for another year or two before his career was over. Then you've got Jimmy G, which to some extent makes sense, but I believe Jimmy G, his landing spot's going to be Vegas because the 49ers, Purdy's surgery, they had to wait a little bit for the swelling to go down in his arm, but you still have Lance, who's coming off a major injury. The 49ers want to get younger and they want to build with one of those quarterbacks. I believe it would be Lance eventually. I don't know if Purdy's got that staying power, but Jimmy G to Vegas makes sense. And then there's Lamar Jackson. I don't think the Jets, I think there's too much red flags with Lamar Jackson. I don't think that's the landing spot for him, but I'll give you a dark horse team. And we touched on it about a month or so ago on BYP, and that's the Washington Commanders. Washington Commanders just hired Eric Bieniemy as offensive coordinator. So Eric Bieniemy, you can say, was the architecture under Andy Reid in Kansas City for all those years with a very unique offense, unique skill set of players and weapons. Now, Washington needs a quarterback. Kansas City has one in Mahomes. Lamar Jackson, you build that offense with a tight end, with wide receivers, slant guys, bubble screens, good running backs. You build that offense, you tailor it around Lamar Jackson, because I think right now, the relationship between Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens is broken. I don't think there's any turning back. The Ravens can turn around and they can exclusive franchise tag for him, but that means you're going to pay Lamar Jackson $45 million next year. I have a couple of reservations regarding Jackson. 10 games missed over the course of 2 seasons. He's only been healthy for an entire season once. That was early on in his career when he played 16 games, 26 years of age. But we know what he can do when he's healthy. He's on the field. We've seen it. Prolific scrambler. Here's a guy that, you want him to cut down on some of the mistakes and some of the misreads, but he's still extremely young, and a change of scenery could help him. And if you're the Washington Commanders, you realize you get a franchise quarterback, you're off and running in the NFC East, where we don't know what the Giants are going to do with Daniel Jones. I'll get to him in a moment. Jalen Hurts has shown he can be a franchise quarterback with Philly, and he's eventually going to get paid. And then Dak Prescott is getting older with the Dallas Cowboys. So the NFC East, the shift of power. I mean, imagine Lamar Jackson going to Washington. And then there's Carr. So we got Carr potentially landing with the Jets, Lamar Jackson potentially landing in Washington. And Jimmy G to Vegas. Carr might also land with the New Orleans Saints. That can be a fit too. And then there's Aaron Rodgers. So I think eventually, if you're the Green Bay Packers, you almost have to tell Aaron Rodgers, fish or cut bait, man. Make up your decision. What are you going to do? And this was brought to my attention. It was a really good point my buddies brought up, because I think when it's all said and done, my gut was telling me Aaron Rodgers was going to retire. And Green Bay's tired of his act. They're getting annoyed by it, right? They're getting frustrated. But if you're Matt LaFleur, you want Aaron Rodgers around for the next 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, think about the success they've had, even though they haven't gotten over the hump and they've gotten to a Super Bowl. They'll get to the playoffs. They own that division. They'll make a deep run. And if they're lucky, they'll have another 1 or 2 NFC championship games. The rest is on Aaron Rodgers, because he has not played particularly well in those spots over the last several years. You cannot deny that. So from a coaching standpoint, LaFleur's, he's selfish. He realizes, hey, man, I want to be able to stockpile some of these wins so I can keep myself in the game as a head coach in the NFL. You don't want to sit there and be 10-35 as an NFL head coach. If you're 35-10, 35-15, you build up a little equity in the bank. You're not going to be on the hot seat. But I also have to look at Aaron Rodgers is older. He's not throwing darts and fastballs like he used to. And he doesn't seem to be all in. And that's why I caution some of these teams, aside from Green Bay, if you're going to take a flyer on Aaron Rodgers. Tom Brady was really not all in this year with Tampa Bay. He just wasn't. And we saw it. His production, he wasn't the same Tom Brady. Numbers wise, completion wise, if you want to argue and say, well, the numbers were the same, mentally, he was not all in for Tampa Bay. And you can't play the NFL. You can't play in the NFL if you're not all in. Aaron Rodgers, to me, doesn't seem to be all in. He's a different animal. He's a Mimi. He's a selfish guy. It's all about him, right? I got to go in the hole. I got to think. I got to retreat. I got to find myself. Let me put everything else on the back burner. But also, the same token, the same breath, I'm going to keep all these franchises potentially hostage. After a while, you got to cut your hands. You just got to untie your hands and say, enough is enough. You're not going to have my hands tied. Enough is enough with this. So I think Aaron Rodgers is going to go back to Green Bay. And this is the point my buddies brought up. Ego thing, money thing, and he doesn't want to retire and have to share the spotlight, say, in 5 years with Tom Brady when they both get into Canton. He's not the same quarterback he once was. So I would caution the Jet fans. I would caution these other teams, before you sell your soul for Aaron Rodgers, be careful a little bit, because the Jets have a good defense and a young offense. They can win right now with Derek Carr. Lamar Jackson of Washington seems like it's going to be that landing spot. And again, I'm just speculating, but I can see Washington, especially knowing that they're going to force Daniel Snyder to sell, and maybe Bezos grabs the franchise. The salary cap goes up. We know that broadcasting rights have gone up, so the money's going to be there. But that changes the complexion in the NFC East. And then there's Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is not a $40 to $45 million quarterback. Daniel Jones has proven he can win football games for the New York Giants. He can be healthy. He can cut down on the turnovers. He can be consistent. And he did that under Kafka and under Brian Daboll, coach of the year for the New York Football Giants. And they won their 9 games, and they went to the playoffs, and they won a road playoff game. And Daniel Jones played exceptionally well this year. And we're going to sit there and we're going to cherry pick those 15 touchdown passes thrown in a league where you should be throwing about 25 to 28. He added 7 on the ground. He had another 700 yards rushing. He had about 4,000 total yards rushing. He won 4 to 5 games on his own with his legs. These are all wonderful things, but he's not worth that type of money. And I don't know if you want to hamstring your franchise paying a quarterback that type of money. To me, Daniel Jones, I would say, hey, I'll give you 2 years at 62, 31 million and a half. And then you're still going to be what, 25, 26, 27. Then we can talk about that 5-year monster deal. But I'm not ready to give Daniel Jones 45 million. And by the way, John Mara did not help himself out. John Mara did not help the Giant brass out when he went on the record and said, to paraphrase, we've done everything in our power to screw this kid, to screw up this kid, right? From head coaching carousel, when you went from Shermer to Judge to Daboll, when you bring in different coordinators. So when you give Kenny Golladay $72 million for nothing, when you have to fluctuate the tight end position, where you draft Tony and then you eventually trade him, where injuries have happened, where you have to rely on guys like Hodges and Richie James to get you through, where Slayton was up and down, Shepard can't stay healthy, Golladay was a $72 million bust. The offensive line is still one of the worst in football. So when Mara comes out and says that, he's in essence saying, yeah, I understand exactly why this kid decides to switch agents, and now he wants to get paid. Right. But again, you're almost helping his leverage in that regard. I still don't believe Daniel Jones is 45 million. If I'm the Giants, get it done, 2 at 31, 2 at 32, 62, I should say, and call it a day, and then figure out what the hell you're going to do with Saquon Barkley. So, but that's kind of where we're at with, these quarterbacks in the NFL. Everything's really going to be incumbent upon Aaron Rodgers' decision, right? Because if Aaron Rodgers decides to go back to Green Bay because of the money and the numbers and his legacy, now if you're the Jets, you're the Raiders, you're the 49ers, you were thinking you were going to have your hand in the cookie jar with this guy. Now you got to come up with a plan B. And we're already bleeding, late February into March. You've got to figure it out, man. You've got to have an idea of what quarterback or where you're going to go with the quarterback position. And this is why I never like when some of these quarterbacks kind of hold these franchises hostage. Brett Favre was notorious for doing that. but it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Hey, just a reminder, our Saturday edition of BYP coming at you live on TV. Delmarva 14.1 is brought to you from our good friends over at One With Life Tequila, women-owned, certified, organic, award-winning, ultra premium tequila. Check them out online, onewithlifetequila.com. Also on social media, on Twitter at OWL Tequila. All right, midway through a Saturday edition of BYP with Q. Rich Quinones here. Apologize for the voice. We would call that calling 20-something hot fights last weekend, losing a voice and the allergy. So we're fighting through it with a little nice little coffee hot toddy on a Saturday morning, talking some sports with you. All right, we'll step aside. When we come back on the other side, second portion of the show, I want to get into this myth, this debate, load management in the NBA, and the old school and the new school thinking. So we'll dive into that on the other side of a Saturday edition of BYP. Keep it locked in. We'll come back right after this. Welcome back, everyone, to a Saturday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. We are coming at you live on a Saturday morning on TV, Delmarva 14.1. So we always appreciate the First State fans for tuning us in and keeping us locked in on this Saturday morning. All right, so we talked a little bit about the NFL. I want to get into the NBA, which, by the way, the All-Star weekend, can we all agree, was an absolute embarrassment? Can we agree that it's a debacle? I mean, remember when the All-Star game meant something? When the weekend, the festivities, Larry Bird, three-point shot, putting his hand up, what was it, 88, 89, winning it all. Jordan and Meek with those slam dunk. Kenny Skywalker, 90, Spud Webb in 86. Magic Johnson, 92 All-Star game, backing down Isaiah and then hitting it, winning the MVP. There's no juice anymore to this. It's become a joke. You've got, no disrespect to, a G League player, right? In Delaware's backyard, winning a slam dunk contest, playing 2 games in the NBA. The players should want to play in this game. The players should want to feel honored to be part of these festivities. And they're not, and they don't treat it that way. But it seems as though the topic of conversation has been, and it still has pretty much been steady when we talk about load management in the NBA. Load management is basically, am I going to sit a night? Am I going to have a guy sit here and there, right? As they get older, as the season wears on, whether it's 72, 82 games. Look, man, I believe that the NBA season is a grind. I believe the NBA season can be long and tedious, but the NBA, the last several years, really the last decade, it's not like it was in the 80s and the 90s. It wasn't. When you went through the 80s and you had the Detroit Pistons, right? The Sixers were town off, Boston in the 80s, Milwaukee in the 80s, the Pistons mid to late 80s. And then, of course, the Bulls start to come into play late 80s, 90, and then Jordan in the 90s, right? Those teams were beating the hell out of each other up. Those years were going 6. Those years were going 7. The NBA was such a different animal. It was more physical. We were not allowing you to drive down the boulevard. We were not allowing you to try to attack the tin. We were going to put you on your fanny. But yet, guys played 82 games. John Stockton, who has come out and he's been very vocal about this load management, and he's basically called it, nonsense. He can say whatever he wants because John Stockton in 19 seasons missed 22 games. 22 games in 19 seasons. And those Jazz teams always made deep runs in the playoffs, culminating with the finals appearance 97 and 98. So the load management, when you pay for a ticket, the expectation is I'm going to see, and again, if we want to go back years, I'm going to see Shaq. I'm going to see Malone, Stockton, Patrick Ewing, Dominique, Tim Duncan, Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, McHale. I'm going to see Kobe. I'm going to see LeBron. I'm going to see AI. I'm going to see Vince Carter and McGrady. The Spurs years ago, Pop would sit players, right? Remember with the big 3, Duncan, Ginobili, Parker. Let me sit these guys. And it's not fair to the fans. And I understand you want to do it judiciously, but at the end of the day, I mean, let's be honest, man. If that's the case, then cut down the season or take your best of seven and now make it best of five. But they're not going to do that because they lose money, right? So it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. If we cut down the NBA season to 62 games and go best of five, now all of a sudden, the years where we want those 7 game series, they're not happening anymore because you want to stretch out the series as long as possible for broadcasting, for network TV, for advertising dollars, for ratings, for eyeballs, for viewers. I never understood why some of these players need the type of rest that they're doing right now. It's embarrassing. It really is. It's embarrassing. Like I can understand someone like a LeBron James who's at a advanced age, 36, 37, 38. This point of his career, this guy's logging 36 minutes. He wants to take a night or two off. I don't have a problem with it. But a player like Embiid, load management, why? Because he runs both ends of the floor and he's a bigger guy. Luka, Joker, load management. You're young guys, man. Donovan Mitchell, you're young guys. Lillard, you guys are young guys. Like, I don't need you guys to sit, every fourth or fifth night here and there. That's a bad look for the NBA because, again, ultimately, the fans are making these cross-country treks. The fans are turning around and they're paying top dollar. They're getting on a plane. They're putting gas in their car. They're driving all over. They're paying gas and tolls, and the wear and tear. And then, oh, by the way, we didn't even mention how much the tickets cost and food and hotel stay. They want to see these players, and your job, because you're making a substantial amount of monies that we can't even fathom in 20 lifetimes, is to go out there and consistently play. I don't recall a time where Shaq or Stockton or Malone or Patrick or Duncan or MJ or Bird or McHale or those guys miss games. Isaiah Thomas or Barkley didn't miss games. They never did. They were playing. And the NBA was so different back in the 80s and then 90s. It was so much more physical, man. Now it's like wide open. The NBA, you turn around, guys are scoring 35, 40, 50, 60 points. It's what Silver wants. Up and down the floor, right? Flash and pass, flash and pass. That's what they want. Pass and flash, pass and flash. That's what they want. 3-point shots at an all-time high. They want the 125 to 120 type of game. In the 80s and the 90s, man, you're talking 83, 80. You're talking 78, 74, 86, 82. Go look in the Eastern Conference. The Knicks, Miami, Indiana, the Bulls, the Pistons. Think about those teams, how they would just ratchet it up. Half court offense be damn, man. They're ratcheting up on the defensive end. It was so much more physical back then, but guys were still playing 80 something odd games. They were playing in 7-game playoff series. So now all of a sudden you got 3 series that go 7. That's another 21. They're playing well over 100 games a year, 107, 110. It's crazy. It's crazy how many games they were playing. And now you want these guys to sit and take a rest, work on, if the guy's hurt, if you're injured, that's one thing. But I mean, do we really need to see some of these guys like be babied? Honestly, the money that these players make is ridiculous, these max contracts. And you're tired. First of all, it's not like you're flying coach, and it's not like you're flying middle class, and it's not like you're staying at a courtyard. No disrespect, courtyards or the Marriotts are nice hotels, but my point is you're not staying at a motel on the highway. You don't have to worry about a cab drive. I mean, you're talking about private jets, private charters, the best hotels. They got the best trainers, the best nutritionists. They have everything they need because of who they are and the league that they play in to keep their body physically fit, to keep their mental state physically aware of their surroundings and everything and ready to go night in and night out. And let's coddle them a little more. Let's give them nights off where Joe Blow is working 2 9-to-5s and he wants to go to a game. And all of a sudden he arrives and he goes into Philadelphia and he realizes at the witching hour, Joel Embiid's going to sit. That's a horrible look. That turns the fan base off. It really does. And like I said, it's not like you can turn around and make it a 62 or 65 game season or make it best of 5 all the way through. They're not going to do that because they don't want to lose eyeballs. They don't want to lose viewership and ratings, because ratings and eyeballs turn into what? Advertising dollars. I mean, this is why even when you go back years ago, when they had the Donaghy scandal, it's like the NBA knows, make these series 7 games, stretch these series out as much as possible so we don't lose an audience. Well, you lost an audience over the weekend because, I got to be honest, I did not even flip on 1 second of All-Star Game festivities. And full disclosure, I was calling the fights in Delaware. And by the way, Gut Check Promotions, shout out to them. Wonderful card Saturday night at the Newark Boys and Girls Club in downtown Newark. So that was a fun time. But 20 fights I'm calling. I'm not going to look at my phone and engage in a slam dunk contest or, skills competition or whatever the hell it was. And I'm not going to watch the game. No, it's lost its luster. And again, look at the money that they're being paid, these athletes in the NBA. They need to be out there on the floor. Unless you are an exception to the rule. And like I said, LeBron James at 37, 38, logging 38 minutes, he's entitled to have a night off. But, Giannis, Tatum, Brown, Mitchell, Embiid, Luka, Joker, no. Play it out, folks. Ride it out. Again, you're young enough. You got a lot of juice. You got a little hop in the step here, right? And I blame Popovich years ago because he was resting the big 3. They were winning their 52, 55, 58 games. They had everything locked up in their division. You knew they were going to be one of the top seeds coming out of Western Conference. So he decides, let me rest these guys. And it's not a good look. It's not. All right, got to start wrapping up on a Saturday edition of BYP with Q. Rich Quinones here. Always appreciate you guys keeping us locked in, especially our good friends in the First Date on TV Delmarva 14.1. Get social with me at Rich Q on Q on Twitter, on IG, the YouTube channel. Subscribe as well. Free content for you all week long, Monday to Friday with BYP. Of course, the pod with Brandon Jacobs, 27 and Q. And we'll give out a lot more plays and picks during the week. So a little more of the sports talk today, more of the picks on Monday. So I encourage you guys to check out the YouTube channel, BYP. As always, appreciate everyone keeping us locked in. Also, special thanks to our good friends over at One With Life Tequila, woman-owned, certified, organic, award-winning, ultra premium tequila. Check them out online, onewithlifetequila.com, at OWL Tequila on Twitter, as we like to say. Have a wonderful sports Saturday. You got some good top 25 matchups as well in college hoops. Enjoy them. Texas, Baylor, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, Indiana, Purdue struggling all of a sudden. So you got a nice little run of the gamut. Follow me on Twitter. I'll send out some plays as well at Rich Q on Q. And remember, as we always like to say, it's all about money management, bankrolling, smart betting and gambling, so to speak. And if you say it, play it. If you play it, you're going to stack it, which means you backed it. All right. So have a good sports Saturday. And of course, we appreciate everyone joining us for this edition of BYP right here on the YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q. And of course, especially on TV 14.1, TV 14 in Delmarva. Have a wonderful Saturday. We will talk to you guys next week. Take care.